Welcome, Andy Jones.
Thanks. Good evening.
Hello, Anya Bork. Andy, we're ready to go, I guess.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for all joining us tonight. My name's Andy Palmer. I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. This is actually the first formal meeting that we've held since the death of Prince Philip. So I just want to say our deepest sympathies go out to Her Majesty the Queen and the royal family. We're currently live streaming via YouTube, and Becky will be live tweeting updates throughout the evening. Could I ask all participants, town councillors and staff, please mute yourself until I ask you to speak. Please use the electric blue or yellow hand question. Two ways of doing this are by clicking on the participant button at the bottom of your screen, selecting the blue hand icon, or the three little dots at the bottom. There could be a yellow hand at the bottom of your screen as well, found by pressing the reaction button. So that people are viewing us on YouTube and can see who is voting, I'd ask the councillors as well to please vote using the yellow hand, the yellow or blue hand, and also your physical hand. And the votes will be recorded by Paul, our town clerk. Please forgive me if we need to move on from a discussion and go to a vote if time is getting short. We currently have 5 attendees registered for this evening, and you're all very welcome. Please can I ask anyone to pose questions through the Q&A board, and we'll patch you in so you can speak. Rachel will be managing and moderating the questions throughout the evening. So with all that said, we'll move on to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. Paul, do we have any?
We've got apologies from Anita Collier, Sarah Butler, Maxine and John, and that's it.
Thank you very much. So next part of this agenda item is declaration of councillor interest. So can I ask if any councillor has an interest in anything this evening? We can take that as a no. Thank you very much. And then final part of the first agenda item, as always, is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting on the 10th of February 2021. So the minutes have been sent out into public domain. Councillors have seen that. So assuming that everything is correct with those, can I have somebody to propose those, please? Steve, and somebody to second. Rich, and with all councillors in favour of those minutes, please vote now.
I've lost Steve. Come in, Steve. Where are you? Have you got your hand up? You have. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That is unanimous.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is questions and comments from the public and councillors. Rachel, do we have anything from the public, or do we have any district or county councillors present?
We don't have any district or county councillors present at the moment, and we don't have any questions.
Thank you very much. So I will throw it open to colleagues at Town Council, please. And we have no questions or comments either. Fantastic. So next I will move on to number 3 on the agenda, which is a brief presentation from Andy Jones, who is the Chair of Fair Housing for Free. So welcome, Andy.
Thanks, Andy. And I know how much you like to keep this meeting to time, so I'll try and keep it fairly brief. I did send in a slide. I don't know if you can present that. Thanks. And I don't intend to read my way through this. But as you mentioned, I've recently taken over as chair of Fair Housing for Frome from Ali Barclay. Ali continues to support us as a director, but this seemed a good opportunity for me to introduce myself to you all in that capacity, and also just refresh you on what we've been doing and plan to do in the near future. Fair Housing for Frome is basically a group of 9 volunteer directors, and we're currently able to employ 3 part-time staff, thanks to some funding from the Tudor Trust, amongst others. And we've got these 3 main aims, really, the 3 planks that we work on: encouraging better use of the housing stock that we have got, trying to enable the creation of new homes that meet local needs, and working to prevent and address homelessness. And we do that with a number of projects. Most of you will already be aware of the Frome Area Community Land Trust, which was set up as an initiative from Fair Housing, and now has a life of its own with its own board and lots of support from people across the town. So that's a really good kick-off. Frome Town Council has recently agreed some funding to help us start up a home share initiative. Again, that now has its own board and its own staff, and that's really trying to connect householders who have a spare room with people who need an affordable place to call home. We've also recently had a very successful seminar. I've jumped down a bit to tiny homes. There was a webinar attended by over 80 people looking at some of the opportunities for a different way of living in smaller shared accommodation and community facilities and so on. About 80 people attended that, and we're now starting to create a group of volunteers and partners to work with to look at how best to take that forward. I hope you've also all been able to tune in occasionally to our show on Frome FM. There's been a series of those over a period of time, doing interviews and telling stories about various housing related issues. But the 2 big things that are sort of current are the housing needs survey, which we're intending to do, as you know, in partnership with Frome Town Council and others. And that's really going to give us the chance to understand the housing requirements of the residents of Frome. And we hope that the results will strengthen our hand and give us some firm evidence about the number and type of households in housing needs, so that that can help shape future requirements. We hope to find out the data on those who are either effectively homeless, in danger of becoming homeless, those who can't afford their current housing, are overcrowded, or in non-secure housing. So it's going to be an information gathering exercise in a very structured manner. It's really been delayed a lot by the pandemic because we wanted to make sure we were going to be able to get out on the streets, talk to people, and give everybody the opportunity to contribute their stories to this research. And then that can be used in our discussions with Frome Town Council and with Mendip when we're talking about future housing needs for the town. And then the final piece that I'll address this evening is what's marked here as the community hub. Up until recently, we've been talking about a housing hub, sort of a central location where people can come for information or signposting on anything housing related. But we're really now thinking that it's going to make sense to operate something more in partnership with other groups like Active in Touch, like Frome Town Council, and create a shared, easily accessible space somewhere in the town centre where we can provide a variety of support to local people. So those were the topics I just wanted to cover this evening, get to the forefront of your thinking. If you've any questions or anything else I can tell you about, I'm happy to do that now.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Andy. Do we have any questions or comments for Andy, please? Rich.
Hi Andy, what's your estimate of the number of homeless people in Frome at the moment? Any ideas?
I'm afraid I haven't. The last data that was collected was quite some time ago. I think Steve may have the numbers to hand.
Steve, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. In terms of rough sleepers, Rich, over the last winter there was anything between, I think, 3 and 5 pure rough sleepers. In terms of actual homeless, if you start to add in sort of sofa surfers and hidden homeless, then that's really the data we're trying to collate at the moment.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Screens have moved around. Ali, please.
I mean, it's interesting because one of the problems that is very COVID related is our young people coming back to stay with family. They've maybe lost their job or they can't afford their rent on other places. They aren't actually considered homeless because they're moving back to a room. And these are people who are sometimes in their 30s, late 20s, 30s. So it's kind of a really interesting one as to how we define homelessness. But they would consider themselves as definitely not in an ideal situation.
Thanks, Ali. Do we have any other questions for Andy? Okay, well, thank you, Andy, for coming along and for the presentation. It's fantastic work that you guys do, and as always, any support we can lend, the door is always open. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll stick around and listen to the rest of the agenda.
Excellent. So we'll move on then to item number 4 on the agenda, which is a discussion on Frome Town Council's community development work. And I believe this is in the hands of both Kate and Hannah.
Hello. So I'm going to kick us off and then Hannah's going to bring it to life. Laura, have you got our slides, please? So you'll have seen in you'll have seen in the paper that there's quite a lot of detail in here about the background, what we've been doing recently, and we just wanted to, as I say, bring that to life a bit for you and share some images in particular so that we could talk to those and you can understand a bit more about what we've been doing. In 2014, we started really to look at, well, actually, I'd say that the town councillors then commissioned a piece of work called Participate Frome, with the expectation that everybody was ready in Frome to take citizen control, and that we would move to a point where the wider population was much more engaged in the decision making, and in an ideal world would be making decisions over the whole budget, really. But we just wanted to check in and see where everybody was at. Our expectation that everybody, broadly, most people in the town were in the upper echelons of this ladder. So they had citizen power and felt like they were in a position really to make decisions and be involved in the decision making. Actually, what we found when we asked people what one thing they liked about Frome and what one thing they would like to change, but more importantly, how they would change it, was that people were much further down that ladder of Einstein's ladder of participation than we were expecting. So they were actually probably more in that tokenism stage of more used to being informed about things, traditional consultation, and they were giving us answers based on their experience. So people were saying that they wanted the Trowbridge High Street replicated in Frome, or that they wanted things done about dog poo, that they wanted Welsh Mill Park to look like Victoria Park and vice versa. My favourite postcard answer was that Frome town centre should be filled up with concrete, so Frome was flat. But broadly, people weren't at a place that we had anticipated. So since then, we've been working on how we better engage people, how we look to involve people more in their town and the decision making that happens in the town. And if you can move to the next slide, Laura. And we've adopted a way of working which is very much asset-based. And moving away from that traditional ladder of participation, we've been looking at how we can move from a place of compelling and educating residents to encouraging really locally led activity to take place in the town. Really, what we're trying to do is work ourselves out of a job. In an ideal world, the decision making, the action will happen in Frome without really the town council having to do a huge amount, and that local projects will bubble up from the ground. People will work out how to deliver them, how to make the changes, and they'll have an immediate impact, positive impact on their immediate and wider communities. So we've been doing this through a community development programme. And if you can move to the next slide, Laura, please. Which is asset-based as opposed to needs-based. So you can see here the difference between the two. We have a new mantra of going slow to go fast. And we are really aiming to build relationships before we need them. So our work has gone from town-wide projects and has now become about street-level activity and how we can deliver this in a street-level capacity. So I'm going to hand over to Hannah to bring all this to life and tell you a little bit more.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everybody. I am going to read from some notes, which I had to make so that I didn't forget anything. So I'll try to bring it to life and not sound like I'm reading from a script, which I am. But I'm going to start from where I picked up the community development work back in the summer, and specifically around the street level groups and looking at the beginning of lockdown. I think lockdown really highlighted the importance of our hyper local support networks. And while many neighbourhoods in Frome already have well-established street groups, there's been a huge increase in the numbers of those kinds of groups in the last year. So at the very start of lockdown, the message was to check in on your 5 nearest neighbours. But lots of streets went a lot further than that, and groups that started with a mutual aid intention ended up morphing into something that was a lot more social. And the mapping exercise we carried out at the start of lockdown gave rise to an opportunity for people who are involved in running their street groups to come together, share ideas, ways of working, ways to come together, what might be needed by their neighbourhoods in the future, things like that. So the neighbourhood network is made up of individuals that act as representatives, or perhaps the better word is conduits, where there's a two-way flow of information and ideas from their street level group to and from the wider network. Laura, can you move on to the next slide? Thanks. So there's some familiar faces there. So the neighbourhood network's been active for over a year now, and I've been supporting with admin and catch-up meetings, collating a monthly newsletter, linking streets into useful trainings and workshops. And also within that, I've been supporting a subgroup of organisation builders who meet to shape the vision and the aims of the group. So essentially a steering group for the network. They're also exploring ways of structuring the network so it's of most value to the members, and becoming an independent organisation. So I'll keep supporting where I'm needed to help take those intentions forward. There was an opportunity at a recent catch-up to reflect on the year that's passed and what members have taken from being part of the network. And for a lot of people, it's been a really vital place to come and feel supported or inspired and connect to something bigger. And there's a desire to expand on feelings of self-reliance, of communities being able to do things for themselves, whether it's to take care of their vulnerable neighbours or to keep their street tidy or to improve a green space that they share. And in normal times, there would be more opportunities for engagement activities and face-to-face conversations in neighbourhoods. But despite restrictions, we've had opportunities to support several streets who are not connected to get started. And I'll pick out a few examples to illustrate the kind of work we've been doing in some broad areas. I'll stick with specifically within the network. In one case, somebody got in touch to ask about starting a group, and it turned out that 2 other people from their street had also contacted me, unbeknownst to each other. And so I was able to set up a group meeting, and they took it from there. So that was a nice easy start, but it kind of shows that people can tap into the network to find their neighbours or to find what's going on near them. And next slide, please, Laura. So we've also initiated projects specifically to encourage people to get talking to their neighbours. Most recently, it was the Grow on Your Street project, where we offered streets a growing kit of seed packets and planters to share out with their neighbours. From doing that, we've had 20 new street groups sign up. Either they've formed a new group or they've registered, they had a group already and registered their group with the network. And there's been a lot of feedback from that, from people telling us it was really good to have an excuse to knock on the door and get talking. It always helps to have a fun reason to be knocking or messaging each other. So that was a good project for people to be doing that. Next slide, please, Laura. That's not the slide I was expecting. Is there, oh, look, I'll talk about that. So Streets Connect doing street level activities, and there have been lots of examples of people taking the initiative to organise these themselves. So things like scavenger hunts or getting involved in Window Wonderland, creating their own share boxes, so like the ones in the parks, but on a smaller scale for their own streets, organising litter picks. And a nice example of that is from the Trinity community groups. So in between lockdowns, Trinity community group, who are really well established and comprise several smaller street level groups, organised a litter pick in the area, and we supported them to do that on the day, and discovered that during lockdown there'd been several new movers into the area. And so although the groups were well established and these new residents were part of those groups, they'd never met in real life before, and so they were able to connect there at the litter pick. And I've heard there have been some great friendships that have begun as a consequence from that. So it's a nice example of that street level activity, making those connections. Next slide, please, Laura. Oh, I feel like I've missed a slide. Is there one going back that's got the neighbourhood toolkit? Maybe the one before.
No, that might be me, Hannah. I might have just missed it out when I transferred from one presentation into the other.
I can talk about it without the slide on. If you go back to the network one, because it's kind of more relevant. Thanks, sorry, Laura. So I've organised online workshops about getting groups started, building on the peer-to-peer training sessions that began in February last year. So these were really successful because we had existing network members join the sessions and share their stories about how they got started. They gave advice and share their experiences, and that's the best thing, to hear from people who have the lived experience. And all the people that attended those Support Your Street workshops felt inspired, and it made them already feel part of something bigger and supported by it already. So that idea kind of underpinned the recent Neighbourhood Toolkit Taster Day, which was a series of bite-sized workshops offering advice for starting a group or making a share box, organising a street party. And it was kind of a prototype for future toolkit trainings. And again, there were network members there that shared their stories of doing all of those things. And there was also lots of examples in those workshops of people connecting with each other while they were taking part, and especially streets who are geographically close to each other, making contact and kind of bridging to almost form a wider connected network of neighbourhood. Okay, thanks, Laura. So back onto the Wild About Trees slide, please. Thanks. So I've been working in partnership with Helen Viner, Wild About Trees project officer, to support residents who are interested in improving or rewilding their local green spaces to build community around their ideas. So an example of this is that there's a resident in Stonebridge who discovered a mini wilderness behind his garden fence, which is actually that one pictured on the map. And he sort of came to us and said, oh, what can we do here? And so we advised him to get some of his neighbours on board to plan some improvements. And so he put together a survey, he knocked on some doors, he got some advice about what plants to cut back, which ones to keep. And then a group of them have been working on a kind of rota system to clear some of the overgrowth. And then now, as things are lifting, they hope to get together in real life over the summer to plan next steps. So that's a really nice example of how a green shared interest over a green space can bring people together too. And then next slide, please, Laura. Oh yes, so really exciting project that's come out of the network meetings also supports this idea for self-reliance, is about restorative conversations. So this came from network members who were considering how best they might support neighbours involved in disputes or local antisocial behaviour, things like that. And a fellow member suggested some training they'd undertaken in previous years called Restorative Conversations. And some of you may know about it, but the restorative approach looks at effectively talking about challenging issues, either in daily conversation or as part of a more formally organised circle. And so we funded and organised the training and opened it out to the wider public, and both as a whistle-stop introduction, which was attended by 46 people, and then some more in-depth training that was attended by 14. And the response from all attendees was really positive, as people realised it's a really effective approach that can work on a really micro-personal level to a much larger organisational or community level. So I've been supporting that group of 14 to meet fortnightly since the training in January to explore together how they could use, promote, expand on their skills and to support a restorative approach to community conversations. So the group comprises individuals with a really big range of skills, experiences and interests, and it's a great mix to deliver that aim. So it's kind of in the very early stages, but I'm really excited about where that might go. And I have got stuff to say about looking ahead. Kate, shall I say that now? I can't see.
Yeah, do that, Hannah.
Yes. Okay, so looking ahead, I am going to continue to support the Neighbourhood Network and its movement towards independently operating, and then when it does so, continue to foster that supportive and enabling relationship we've developed together over the year. And then also to continue to support that restorative group, particularly with some focused asset mapping to see what's already out there, look at potential funding needs, opportunities, and to develop the project to be of most value to the community, interest to the members, link it in closely with the Neighbourhood Network as it develops. To develop the toolkit into a place that holds everything you need, everything you want to do in your street. So physical resources, workshops, trainings, advice, templates, links, things that will be useful. Obviously, link in with a multitude of projects and community building opportunities that are happening in town. So Wild About Trees, Green and Healthy Features, Play Strategy, Free May Down, FTC events, etc. And the one I am really excited about is to be out and about again when we can. Attend a lot of street parties, but also, more importantly, target areas that are less obviously connected into each other or into their wider networks and be out and about in those places. Support residents to run play streets if they want to. Keep thinking about how we build capabilities and support people to develop their own networks and uncover assets, and then use all of those engagement opportunities to inform future work plans. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Hannah. That was a brilliant summary of the not very much that Hannah's been doing in the last year. Actually, we could probably stop sharing. Yeah, great. Thanks, Laura. So I guess, that just gives you a flavour of some of the work and how much we are increasingly working across different pillars of our work stream, if you like, to make some of our projects real at a street level, and also to hear and build some of those projects and ideas that are bubbling up from our residents in their local areas. But that's not to say that everything that we do at Frome Town Council fits neatly into an asset-based model of community development and building from the bottom up. So we're forever finding that mix and where the balance is across our work. I am conscious that, two things, probably you've got questions, and also Annabelle and Esme, who are members of the Neighbourhood Network, are participants here, so they might like to to join us, attendees. So if you do, Annabelle and Esme, and you can hear this, maybe stick a note in the chat, or if you've got any comments to add, and we can bring you in. And over to everybody for questions.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Hannah. Excellent as always. I can see a hand straight away from Anne, please.
I can't hear you, Anne.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I love all of this community development stuff. And I've got an idea, and it's about one of the assets that's not a tangible asset, and it's all of our skills and knowledge and experience. Is there any way we could have a sharing platform for maintaining my washing machine, or getting my lawnmower to start at the beginning of summer, or helping me cast off in knitting, or how do I darn stuff, and stuff like that, that if I knew I had a close neighbour that was willing to share their skills and teach me, that would be really great. And the other thing is, how do we engage with the people of Frome who think that we ought to be replicating Trowbridge Town Centre, and think that we ought to be doing the sort of things perhaps that a more traditional town council might be doing? How do we show them that this is important too?
If I start to answer those, Hannah, but I expect you to chip in, particularly if you think I've gone off on the wrong tangent. So in answer to your first question, Anne, I think that's what this is absolutely all about. So it's all about making connections. It's a bit kind of, it's an enabling role that we are taking on, and we're really giving people permission to talk to each other and to chat to each other and to share those experiences. And the stories that we've heard from the streets around us and that have come through the neighbourhood network are absolutely of things like that. I've got this plant, what do I do with it? Does anybody know? Or has anybody got a lawnmower that I could borrow? Particularly on the newer estates, people don't have big gardens, and not everybody therefore needs a lawnmower. So people are starting to share resources more frequently, to ask each other questions. And COVID and the pandemic has springboarded that culture of supporting and talking to each other into a whole new remit, really. We weren't anticipating. This has been building very, very slowly for a really long period of time, and suddenly catapulted into a whole nother sort of area of engagement, really. So I guess that happens naturally. We have got spaces across town, and that's some of those town-wide projects where people can connect, and the neighbourhood network have been really good at finding those opportunities of taking on bits of training or hearing more from organisations like Mendip Health Connections, and sharing that back through their platform, if you like, and sort of cascading that information. So what we're seeing is that all of that sharing of ideas and knowledge and skills is naturally happening. And the assets, when we talk about asset-based community development, rather than fixed assets, we absolutely mean skills and ideas. It's about people. People are the assets. So that's the answer to your first question. And I'm not sure if Hannah's got anything to add to that. Hannah, have you?
Not really. It makes me think of the council, the staff and councillors had the asset-based community development participatory community building training, and there were some really nice tools in that. And so one of the ideas for the toolkit for the bite-sized sessions would be to share some of those tools as well, so that people might replicate them in their neighbourhoods. So there's one that's like that: know, teach and learn. Like, what do you know? What do you know well enough to teach? What do you want to learn? So the similar things like that might be a nice thing to share.
And then your second question, Anne, you'll have to remind me because I've forgotten.
How do we engage with the people who think we ought to be replicating Trowbridge Town Centre?
Hannah will have a really good answer to this, I'm sure. So it's a bit the same as the question of how do you engage with the hard to engage. And Hannah, the answer to that is, if you're asking where you find them.
Oh, where you left them.
Yeah, so it's about being out and about, Anne, and we are desperate. We've had a year of doing everything from behind a screen, and the next step for Hannah, and I think she briefly summarised it at the end there, is to go out, is to identify the spaces that we haven't got huge. We don't know that there are many networks in, and we might find that when we're out and about and chatting to people, they're really well connected with each other. And then there is an opportunity for them to join their neighbourhood network if they choose to. There are opportunities for them to engage with Hannah if they so desire and if they would like more support. But it is about being out and about and finding every opportunity to talk to people. So yeah, we're planning a summer of, fingers crossed, foot stomping.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Anne. I've got Hans, Scott, and then Rob, please.
Hello. Yeah, it was just to link in with Anne's first question there about sort of skills and linking in with groups. I actually set up a Facebook group probably 4 years ago now, Froome Skill Swap, which sort of had that same idea. It's got about 250 members, I think, at the moment, but it's been very slow and not very active, especially over the last sort of 12 months of the pandemic. So it'd be great if that's something that, you know, if anyone's interested in picking up and evolving and adapting into what's going on, then that would be fantastic.
Thanks, Scott. Hannah or Kate, do you want to come back on that, or shall I move on?
No, that's great. We'll check it out, Scott.
Excellent. Rob, please.
Hi. Yes. Yeah, I really think what you're doing is fantastic. It's great. Couple of questions. One, just wondering how many more neighbourhood groups have actually got off the ground in the last year. You know, that little map you produced, I wonder whether that is the current lot, and then, you know, do you know what the picture was at the beginning? And then a rather more general question, which is, there are all sorts of groups around Froome. I mean, the most obvious one which comes to mind in terms of skill sharing is allotments. And I'm just wondering whether you're tapping into those kind of existing networks. So, I mean, obviously the neighbourhood network is based around residents and homes and streets and that sort of thing. But we've got all sorts of other kinds of groups which are already out there. And I'm just wondering whether there's some way of drawing them into this kind of a rich network of intersectionality, I think is the hip word. Anyway, that's the question.
So in answer to the first question, Hannah, you've got the statistics of the number of groups that are currently signed up, haven't you? How many have you got on there?
Yeah, so we've got 69 street level groups signed up. Some of them have multiple people as named members.
69?
69, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And in the last 6 months, 42 of them have signed up in the last 6 months. And then there are also, like, I've come across quite a few groups who don't have, so they just have a really strong word of mouth connection. So they're like, oh, we're not a group, but I feel like there's untold numbers of groups like that kind of are very unofficial. You wouldn't say that they have a group for. And some of them have tapped in as like signed up to the network as that, but they don't necessarily even have a WhatsApp group or an email group. They just talk to each other a lot. So there's a lot of more unformalized groups, I think.
And I think what we're finding, Rob, about, you know, how many are newly joined and how many are historic groups, is it's quite difficult to tell because streets have definitely become more connected in the last year. And so they might have formalised themselves a little bit more or created a WhatsApp group so that they can communicate more easily. But they might have been well connected previously, but wouldn't necessarily have identified themselves as a group. And the more Hannah is out and about talking to people, the more those other groups will come forward that do exist but don't necessarily recognise themselves as one. In answer to your second question, that I think that happens quite naturally already, because obviously everybody that's involved in their street network, or anyone that's involved in any of those other groups that you've described, like the Allotments Association, also lives on a street. So lots of that information and skill sharing is happening at a very local level. And actually a lot of it is happening in the neighbourhood network, I would suggest as well, Hannah. And this might be an opportune time to ask Annabelle and Esme if either of them would like to join us, just to answer that question a bit more. I can see they've both put a note in the chat.
Yeah, do we want to patch them in?
They are both joining us. Annabelle.
Annabelle, would you like to go first?
Hello. Yes, could you just repeat what you'd like me to say?
Just in terms of linking in with organisations like the Allotments Association or other community groups across the town, is there an opportunity to do that more? How do you feel that the neighbourhood network might do that? Or is it already happening because people are already members of those groups and members of the network?
Yes, I think it is definitely possible to. It's this whole idea of the geographical community, isn't it? And that we get to know people who are where we live, and if there's a green space there, then we can connect with people on developing that. And so I mean, if say there's a load of allotments, I don't see why there shouldn't be a kind of connectivity between a street and those allotments, even if the people aren't from there. But it seems like there's obviously some connection that could be made between a place made kind of community, if you like, place-based community.
Yeah.
And also Andy can input into that. Andy Jones, who supports the Friends of Broadway allotment group, links is the kind of bridge for them into the network.
Yeah, that was the comment I was actually going to make, was that I'm both a resident of one group and I'm involved with the Broadway community garden group as well. So there's a lot of intersection between those activities. And of course this recent Seeds of Connection initiative is all about pulling together those people who've become lockdown gardeners with people like myself who've been gardening for 5 decades, and sharing that experience and building that knowledge together.
Fantastic, thanks Andy. Paul, your hand's up.
Thanks, Andy. I'm picking up a really interesting scheme of work that we need to explore. I think is this sort of building on this skills shop swap somehow. And I wonder if Hannah and Kate and I can take that away and see what we can develop with it, because I think there's some really little nuggets in the discussion we've had. So I'd quite like to develop those thoughts if you thought that was all right.
They are muted.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. Rachel, you...
just to remind you that Esme is also here.
Fantastic. Esme, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I was just on the matter of, hi everyone. Yeah, on the matter of, there was just an interesting point today. So there's a member of the network who has marketing and design skills and who's been working with us on developing a logo, which has been a kind of exciting recent phase. And a comment was made today by one of the network members. We've been discussing the presence of buildings and then green spaces in the logo, and somebody had made reference to the fact that they saw the network as being absolutely about people and spaces rather than specifically buildings. I was just thinking about the allotments and, you know, how all of these three things kind of feed in. But because we've been thinking about that visual. But no, I think the thing I've become so aware of is just how idiosyncratic each tiny group is, and then just how rich it is when we all come together and share those experiences. And it just, for the past year, has provided such an amazing sense of support and connectivity. But like Hannah was saying, I'm just really excited to start meeting other people in the flesh now as well, and sharing those experiences more widely in street parties, etc. But no, the network, it feels like a really flourishing, endlessly growing thing. Yeah, we're proud of what's been happening.
Excellent, thanks, Esme. Any other questions or comments before we move on?
Rachel, have you got your hand up?
No, not now.
Thank you very much.
Could I just jump in?
Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, could I just jump in? And there's a note from Peter McFadgen, I think, or maybe it's another Peter. I don't know. It's hard to know. He's just saying in relation to the Skillshare, it's in the chat. I'm just reading it out. It might be good to revisit the history of one of the most active let schemes in the country that the council was a key player in. So just mentioning that.
Excellent. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Peter. Excellent. Well, again, Kate, Hannah, fantastic. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for all the work that you do. It's not an area that traditionally I've been close to in the work programme, but it blows my mind every time I learn a bit more. I know we talk about how do you measure the intangible sometimes with a lot of the stuff that you guys do, but when you look at the metrics of some of those numbers in terms of new groups and what's happened over 6 months, it's fantastic. It's absolutely amazing. So thank you again. Right, we'll move on then to the next agenda item, which is number 5, to approve a new major grants fund, and I believe Kate's working overtime.
Me again. So major grants. This has come out of a piece of work that we've done with the co-design group, the grants co-design group. And over the last year, we've been working with a group of interested residents and representatives of local organisations to make sure we can develop a grant process that's fit for purpose. You've heard about the community grants, and we've been through the first round of those. This major grant fund, we had a major grant last year. It was a one-off big grant, and before that we actually had multi-year agreements, and those multi-year agreements were decided by and agreed by councillors and distributed to 11 organisations, I think, who all received funding for a 3-year period. So this is a bit of a shift, a bit of a change that's being proposed now to make sure that we sort of level that playing field, that we create some opportunities for other organisations to benefit potentially from more than 1 year funding, to account for large grants over £3,000, because our community grants only go up to £3,000, and to have an opportunity to fund maybe infrastructure costs of an organisation, maybe to fund for more than 1 year, but really to create, this was looking at creating a large grant fund that was fit for purpose and worked for our organisations. So it was a little bit, it was a challenge because of course all of the 15 organisations in the room and the other 105 organisations in the town would love to have multi-year funding from Frome Town Council. And when you ask them what the ideal amount would be, it always lands at about £10,000, which would equate to more than our precept and our entire budget. So trying to create something with a £55,000 budget, it took a little bit of time and a lot of support from Public Square, who facilitated the process. And actually what we've got is a proposal for you in the paper here and a set of terms and conditions that has been agreed by the grants advisory panel and also by all of the people that were involved in that co-design process. So actually it's a piece of work that we're really quite pleased about, as long as everything goes through the next sort of iterations relatively well for us. The big change is that we have lowered the amount that we're expecting to grant in the average, so with the average grant being between about £5,000 and £6,000. We've said in the terms of
Kate, you've muted yourself.
When did I mute?
About 10 seconds ago.
Okay, it's okay, not from the beginning then. We don't expect applications from organisations with a turnover of more than £500,000 or from national organisations. However, in both of those cases, in exceptional circumstances, we would consider applications. So if an organisation with a really large turnover, and we actually have some local organisations with significant turnovers, can demonstrate that they really need that funding from us and that there is a good evidence of need for a local project, then it would be considered by the grant panel. We were really looking to, I guess, cast off through the first round of looking at those applications, organisations that were putting an application into every town council in the southwest, that have reserves of unrestricted reserves of kind of £2 million, etc. Similarly, if an organisation were to say, look, we really need £10,000 for this project, and we can tell you why, and you can see that the need is really high, then we would also consider that, but we wouldn't expect that to be the norm. The applicants should expect that their funding will be 1 year, but after a period of review and evaluation by the Grants Advisory Panel, it might be that the panel decide that they would benefit from a future year's funding or half a year's funding in order to complete the project or to take it to its natural the natural sort of place where our funding were to subside and somebody else's funding were to come in, or it becomes sustainable. We also heard from others that it would be really great for the Grants Advisory Panel to have members of the public join it and to become a part of that board, which is much the same as the community grants. The people that were representing it, in the co-design group, suggested that it would really help them if there were a pre-application stage, so that if their idea was likely not to go through, they would know that quite early on, rather than go through the process of filling in a long grant application form. And similarly, they also wanted the opportunity to be for councillors and members of the Grants Advisory Panel to be able to ask them questions. So what we're proposing today is that the Grants Advisory Panel become a panel in its own right, that they meet publicly, that there is an opportunity for applicants to be asked questions of their applications, but the actual decision making would happen after a period of reflection. Now that might be later that day, it might be the following day, but it would enable some opportunity for more detailed in-depth discussion if required, and also for the allocation of money, of funding to be done behind closed doors, in order that some of those tricky conversations can happen in a sensible and timely way. So I guess that's where we've got to. I think I've covered everything, unless Mark tells me otherwise. And Laura, perhaps you could bring up the recommendations, please. So the recommendations are to approve the process as outlined in the report and the terms and conditions, to delegate authority to me in consultation with the Grants Advisory Panel to create the application form, which would mean that then this first grants window would be able to open in early May, and then to delegate authority to the Town Clerk in consultation with the Grants Advisory Panel to award the grants using the process detailed in the report, and those would be ratified at future town matters meetings. Has anybody got any questions?
Do we have any questions, guys? I can see Rich, please.
Hi, thanks, Kate. Just thinking about the members of the public making decisions as well, which we agree was a really good idea. Have we got any closer to working out who those people might be and how we might do it? And just as a suggestion, maybe something from the neighbourhood networks, people from the neighbourhood networks being part of that might be a way of going forward with that. I just wondered how far we got with the thinking.
Great, we haven't. Is a simple answer. So that's the next step really for the existing Grants Advisory Panel to come together and have that conversation about how we could do that. And maybe we can start an email thread between us. I think most of you are on that Grants Advisory Panel currently, so we can start that conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Good evening, everyone. It's really interesting what you're talking about, Kate, and I think it's a really sensible route that you and Mark and the rest have come to. But one of the things I've always noticed over many years is that, and one of the things I remember in one of my first meetings with you was the importance of helping those people who aren't familiar with this process to get through, because I see, and I'm sure we all see the same people who are successful in applying for grants because they know how to write the application forms, how they know how to sort of get access to those funds. And of course, that's understandable, but it's how we make sure that we have in our systems and processes the support available for people who are less articulate, if you like, in their application. That's all, but I know you've got that in hand.
Thanks. Actually, you just prompted me, really important reminder. In the last presentation, most of the things that you saw were by virtue of the communications team, who do just the most amazing job of supporting all of our work. And actually, most of the work that happens in neighbourhoods happens because of the communications team too. The same goes for the support that we give to community organisations. And I did notice that the comms team sent out a newsletter today to community organisations saying, if you ever need any help with anything, please do contact Kate Hellard, and they put my email as a link. Thanks, Becky. But in all seriousness, that's what I'm here to do, and we do promote that. It is really important that we do, and that was another thread that really came through from that co-design group from organisations. They wanted to make sure that there was somebody at the town council that could help them fill in the application forms, that could help them look for future funding, that could advise them if they were going wrong with the application so that they had every chance of success, hence the pre-application process. And yeah, we really are looking to build that. Yeah, I guess that's something we need to continue to promote and ensure that groups get, and that we recognise that the issues that organisations have are actually the same issues as businesses have. So our community organisations in Frome have all experienced exactly the same issues as the businesses in Frome, particularly over the last year, without necessarily as much support as some of the businesses have been able to receive. So as they're coming back out of the woodwork, they're asking for more and more help.
Thanks, Kate. I can see a hand from Sheila as well, please.
Is that me?
Yes,
Okay.
Sheila, please go ahead.
Sorry. I was just thinking on the first group of people, because of the experience you've had with the people that you've been working with to get this grants review going. I was wondering whether the first group of people who should be on that grants committee from the general public might be some of those people who worked with you on that and know the background of lots of different organisations and know the background of the sort of grants that we've now proposed. It might be useful to have some of them on that committee, just to begin with.
I guess the only thing we might need to consider when we have that conversation is whether the conflict of interest for some of those people is going to be difficult for them, because most of those people represented organisations that are keen to apply for a grant. And we've always requested that councillors step out of the conversation when they have a conflict of interest with an organisation if they're involved. So it would be the same for members of the public.
I think it would be useful for people for the general public who join you on that grants committee to have some understanding of how grants applications work, and the comment that Nick's just made, how difficult it is for small organisations to really apply, and also the comments you made about then there are sort of nuances you might want to consider that would fall outside the general rules and regulations that you're setting up now. So it is quite complex.
Maybe there's an induction process, Sheila.
Yeah, something like that might be useful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sheila. I can see Mark, please.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Kate. Sheila, your point is valid. Unfortunately, a lot of the people who did turn up to some of these meetings with a vested interest were trying to defend their position and making sure that they didn't lose out, particularly those who've received multi-year agreements in the past. And so they would shout the loudest if they came to these meetings. But your point is correct, that those who've helped us formulate this process would be the best place to start. Also, we've discussed, and we've done in the past, of sponsoring a bid writer or someone who's used to doing grants to help people out, and we've offered that facility to people in the past. Something we could consider for the future. Spending a small amount of money on a fee for somebody like that can raise quite a bit of money, exponential rewards for the outlay. I think this is as good as we can get. We had a long discussion, and those people you were talking about being a part of the group were all saying, well, just give us the multi-year agreement going forward and we'll all be happy and go away and we'll not trouble you again. But I think we've had to be quite firm on this and say that we'd like to get more people involved, more groups to get grants, more organisations off the ground, rather than just keep sponsoring the same ones who we'd hoped, you remember from the last regime, you'd hoped that it was like seed money so they could stand on their feet and get going by now, rather than just depending on us. But anyway, hopefully this, I commend this recommendation. Thank Kate for her help. Thank everybody else who's worked with the councillors and those members of the public who've helped us to try and get to where we are. So hopefully in the new year we can hand over a new and improved system. Let's hope that's going to happen.
Thanks, Mark. And thanks, Kate. I don't think I can see any more questions. So if we move on to the recommendations, Paul, process, are we going to take these one by one, or are we happy to defer and take all four in one go?
It seems as though I'm feeling the mood of doing them all together.
Yeah, okay.
I would suggest that. And as one of the authors, I'd better recommend it. I'd better propose.
In that case, recommendations, do we need to put them up again, or are we happy as read? Looks like we're happy. So, Mark, are you recommending?
I'll propose.
Proposing, sorry. And somebody to second that, please. Anne. So all councillors in favour. Can we see manual hands up as well, guys, please?
That's unanimous.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. So again, thanks, Kate. Thanks, Mark. Thanks to the other members of the working group on that, and to the wider grants advisory panel. Brilliant stuff moving forward. So we'll move on then to item number 6 on the agenda, which is to ratify the Town Clerk's decision on the View from Here community grant. Is that back to you, Kate, or Paul? Are you?
It's me, but I promise I will stand down after this.
Treble time.
So this is just in line with our relatively new community grants process. This application was made. It was agreed by the grants advisory group. That was then agreed with Town Matters, but it was agreed that the funding would go to Reclaim, and there's subsequently been a request that the project move to the Black Swan Arts. So this is just for information and for ratification, so that you understand that the funding has gone with the project from one organisation to be held under another, that the terms of the grant that was agreed at the Town Matters meeting stay the same, that the grant can be drawn down subject to Arts Council funding. So if you like, this is match funding with Arts Council funding, but it's a technicality, so that we are putting in action our new process for grants, which will ultimately be signed off by Paul and then ratified at a Town Matters meeting.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Any questions? No. So can I have somebody to propose that, please? Scott, somebody to second it. Anne, all councillors in favour, please.
I think that's unanimous, Andy. Can someone wave radically if I have not quite counted correctly? No, that's unanimous.
I saw 10 there, Paul. Excellent. So in that case, we will move on to the final item on the agenda tonight, which is to apply to designate the Kiefer Community Garden as an asset of community value. And I believe we're going to invite Anya Bjork to talk to us about the Kiefer Community Garden.
I think I've unmuted. I'm just trying to start my video.
Good evening, Anya.
Hi, I'm just trying to start the video here on the Zoom. Let's see. Yeah, I'll just see if I can get it. Yeah. Yeah, hi. Hi. Thank you, Paul. I think you're proposing this and I'm here to answer questions. I think that's right, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Anya. As we say in the report, the MENDIP have advised Anya that and Rebecca Morland that because you're not a constituted group, you can't submit an application for an asset of community value, and they've advised the group to ask us to do it on their behalf. So this is a request to councillors to submit an application that that Rebecca and Anya have put together in the hope that MENDIP would consider appointing it as an asset of community value. Anya, I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
No, but obviously we're very aware of how much development there's going on in Frome at the moment, and the Broadway Gardens. There's been a big development at the back of Kiefer Gardens as well, fairly recently. All of that makes us concerned that we really do want to protect this space. It's the the last surviving Mendip Community Garden. They were set up about 30 years ago. And I have spoken to Alice Nash, who was the person who set it all up 30 years ago. And she said it's the only surviving one in the whole of Mendip.
Fantastic. Okay, so I can see questions from councillors. I've got Ali and then Rich, please.
I can't hear.
Ali, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry. If we vote for something to become a community asset, does that mean we're voting for just the particular, because my understanding is that Keyford Community Gardens is a small gardens that people in that area garden. Is that right?
There's a terrace of about 20 houses.
Yes, I know the area, but I suppose...
and then obviously there's Crown Gardens and also people from Keyford. So really it's open to the whole community around here. It's it was revamped in 2009, and one of the things we did at that time, with the advice of the sort of people who ran Victoria Park, was actually to open it up rather than put gates on it, so that people could come and go, and that there had been a problem with some antisocial behaviour, and actually since 2009, by opening it up, we've had no problems at all.
Cool, thank you. That's what I was really asking. Is it open to the public?
Yes, it is.
Cool.
Thanks. I think I have Rich and then Mark, please.
Hi. Yeah, I used to know Bob, and it's great 30 years. When I first discovered it, it's a really nice little space. So I fully support this. I just wondered how many people are still using it. I haven't been to have a look for a while, but it's a lovely little space. And does everybody know where it is?
Well, everyone in the local community knows, and I cannot tell you how many children have been there in the past year. With lockdown, goodness knows where all the children came from, and there's lots along the terrace as well. One of the things we're doing this year is, and we were hoping to do it last year, but we couldn't because of lockdown, is we're going to be part of Open Gardens in the festival. So that, again, more people will know about it. And one of the things we're going to do is put on an exhibition. We've got some of the archive photographs from Alice of the original derelict land from 30 years ago, and some of the things that have been done. And we thought actually people in Frome in general might be really interested in seeing, the sort of initiatives that were happening 30 years ago. There's a lot of newspaper coverage, and seeing gardens that have been lost since then, and spaces that no one even knew were a community garden. It's really interesting to look at that archive. So we will try and get, we think more people know about it then. I think a lot of people probably don't know about it in the wider community because it is tucked away. That's also what's protected it, because access means that it isn't probably suitable for development, but who knows nowadays.
Okay.
I haven't seen it for a few years, but tell Rich I could.
Guys, sorry, my internet connection is really unstable. I don't know if you can hear me, but Mark, please.
Thank you, Andy. Anya, I read your application, and of course would love to support it. On a practical basis, which everybody expects from me, you say at the moment the public liability insurance is held by Mendip.
Yes.
Were it to become an asset of community value or run by yourselves, or if that's the same thing, how would that aspect of it be covered? Because I think you charge £7 a year membership at the moment, and I don't think that would go anywhere near to covering it.
No, I don't know. We haven't checked that with Mendip. The last time I was in touch with them, about the public liability insurance was 2015, and they didn't even really seem to know that we existed, but they did check the public liability insurance, and they assured me that we are covered by that because they own the land. My understanding is if we become an asset of community value, I mean, they still own the land, but we have some protection, I think. I see people nodding. There are probably people who know more about this than I do at this meeting.
Should I just clarify?
Yes, thank you.
You're absolutely right, Anya. The designation of an asset of community value has no impact on the ownership, and therefore Mendip will continue to have public liability. The designation means in future that if, and it's a big if, given the description Anya has just given to us, if Mendip want to sell the land, then because it's designated an asset of community value, the community, in this terms, it will be the town council and the community garden, will be given 6 months to develop a bid for that land, so to raise the money. That's the only significance of an asset of community value. It makes it, as Anya has implicated, one step more safe than it would be without.
Thanks, Paul. Scott, please.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing as Paul there. As far as I was aware, the primary reason is to protect it from being sold off in the future. That's the primary function of the registration. My question would be, obviously, as Paul mentions there, if that came to that point, it would be the town council on behalf of the community that then has the option to purchase the land within 6 months. Is this not something that we might look at in the same sort of aspect that we have done with some of the other green spaces around the town, and dealing with, speaking to Mendip about taking it into ownership, like, Talview Park by myself here?
Andy, do you want me to respond to that?
Yes, please, Paul.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Scott. If Mendip wanted to sell it, the town council and the community group would have the opportunity to put a bid in to Mendip. They wouldn't have to accept it. That's the crucial point there. And I think it is certainly one of those places around the town that we could explore acquiring if Mendip is keen to offload it, and we could work up some plans and come back to councillors if Anya would like us to do that, and if councillors thought it was appropriate.
Obviously, yes, we'd like to keep it. I know that wouldn't be, that's not really our decision, but obviously we have a constitution, we have a sort of committee. So, we do have ways that you were talking a lot about, neighbourhood groups in this meeting earlier. And it has been one of the real ways that our neighbourhood here has bonded. So, yes, we would have ways of discussing with you if ever the situation changed. The Constitution has been, I think, one of the reasons that it has survived for 27 years when other community gardens disappeared.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Anya. Appreciate you coming along to answer questions and the like. If everybody's happy, if we've got no further questions or comments, I'd like to take this to the recommendation, which is sorry, I've lost the, is to apply to Mendip to designate Kiefer Community Garden as an asset of community value. So do we have somebody to propose that, please? Mark, and to second it, I can see Rob. And for all those councillors in favour, if you could please raise your hands.
That's unanimous.
Just want to say thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you again, Anya, for coming along and answering questions on that. That's fantastic. Okay, so in that case, I would just ask, does anybody else have any other business this evening? Okay, I can't see anybody that does. In that case, I will bring the meeting to a close and to thank you all for attending and look forward to seeing you at the next Town Matters meeting.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Andy.